Good morning, everyone. I'm Neha, Ambassador of Change for GETI, that is Global Education and Training Institute, founded and conceptualized by Dr. Sunita Gandhi with the vision of disrupting the education movement. We also organized in service and pre service training for teachers so that they can also spearhead this disruptive education movement. And alongside, we also organize detox where we invite policymakers, educators, researchers, bureaucrats from around the world to discuss various best practices with us. And today I am very honored and thrilled to have with us Mr. Fawad Ali, who is the UN ambassador at the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights based in Karachi and Pakistan. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us this morning. Very warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Neha, and thank you very much for inviting. And the best part of your entire introduction was the ambassador of change. That's something very, very important, I must say. And you got a big job to do that. Seriously, the name is very small, but the responsibility is too much on that. So keep going with that.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your kind words. Sir, today we'll be talking about the role of education in achieving the huge sustainable development goals that we have in front of us. So, would you like to introduce the concept of SDGs and what we expect from SDGs? Just a general introduction for our audience who is watching and who will eventually watch.
Yeah, certainly. You know what? If I just go back when this pandemic has started, like why this has touches to me a lot. I mean, I found much interest, so much comfortability about reading all these SDGs because, to be honest, now I can see, in my opinion, in upcoming years and decades, totally depend on that. Those amazing 17 goals has covers everything that the mankind today's world really need that even after this global pandemic, seriously. So if I talk about a little bit history about that, that is very important because after you can say discussing, after researching on that, if I still ask to the people about the SDGs, they are lacking to understand, they are lacking to tell like what all these all about. So it is very important to get a proper concept about the SDGs in the beginning, like what happened earlier, how did these great 17 span has come across. So earlier, if I talk about the origin of it, like there was a big question. It said like, how did they arise? Why the United Nations member states have actually, and also all the governments who actually feel that yes, we need, this is a time we need the sustainable development goals. So the historical fact is almost like about several decades before, most like about four and a half, or let's say about 5 decades. So back in about 45 years, somehow 1972, there was a conference which was called as Conference on Human Environment,
Yeah.
and then the idea behind was the only one Earth concept.
Yeah.
In that, the behavior of governments, businessmen, citizens, even researchers, students, activists, different consumers, different stakeholders has actually shared their point of view. And even that was the first ever conference that in the United Nations that actually recognized the economy on other hand, while
Mm-hmm.
the environmental issues on the other hand as well. There
Absolutely.
was a bit of a collision of both of the interests where they were somehow, you can say, emphasizing the environmental risk and also uncountable and uncontrollable producing different productions were which have nothing to measure onto that they keep producing, and unfortunately they actually going against the climate. That was
Okay.
actually the sense which have been made at that time, like this needs to be stopped, this needs to be controlled because it was actually a huge risk on the environment that side. Then after 15 years, there was a very important commission has been established under the leadership of Dr. Gro Harman Bertland, and that's
Mm-hmm.
commission known as the Bertland Commission, very important commission, which actually come up very, very good idea about and define the major essence of sustainable development. and that
Okay.
actually clears one of the biggest concept of inside the sustainable development is about the meeting the future generation needs without compromising the ability of that.
Yep.
So
Yep.
from there, there was another thing comes like these SDGs have a huge inclusion of today's youth because it's clearly emphasizing about the future generation.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing we found. And then right now, in all of the 17 goals,
Mm-hmm.
one third is actually emphasizing about the inclusion of the youth actually. So the
Yep.
youth have a very, very good and very important role to play in these SDGs to be achieved actually. After 20 years of that, you can say conference, and in 2012, the United Nations members have actually gathered at to the Rio conference, which was known
Okay.
as actually the Rio 20.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
the government said, like, what can we do? We have these measures, how we can put sustainable development goals in front of the entire world because they have the urgencies about the poverty, about the economical issue, about the production issues, about HIV/AIDS at that time. It was very, very another, you can say, a big issue at that time. So they actually formed from the 2000 to 2015 another year, which was known as actually Millennium Development Goals.
Yep.
We hear
Yep.
back actually into that. So they found the Millennium Development Goals, which we had about 8 to 9 goals in between: health, poverty, HIV/AIDS was one of that, education was one of that actually. And that idea was further championized, and then they form up from 2015 to 2030,
Okay.
where the member states of the General Assembly have come like, now this is what we call the SDGs in that.
Yep.
But
Yep.
in our when we start researching, when we see or when we talk about it, just like these 17 goals. But trust me, earlier on, the proposal was 300 goals earlier, where the government
Okay.
have took several of we can say surveys. They negotiated 3 years onto that. They put the
Mm-hmm.
priorities onto that, and then they
Okay.
found like, okay, this needs to become underneath that. These areas needs to be because we have 17 goals. In 17 goals we have 169 targets and 251 indicators to judge all those performances. So that's the
Yep.
beauty of that. And then they found these MDGs actually in 2015, and they come up
Okay.
with those 17 high priority goals with the concept of peace, which call
Yep.
prosperity, people, planet, or you can say the economic, social, and environmental objectives. And they put it into the framework, and the framework which having the commitment of that are known as the Agenda 2030, that
Yeah.
from the period of 2015 to
Mm-hmm.
2030 they need to achieve this. And we have this, and you can say these SDGs in September 25th,
Mm-hmm.
2015, having
Okay.
169 targets and approx about 251. We have the indicators to keep monitoring the performances of the Sustainable Development Goal. So that's actually the main concept, the historical
Concept
impact
of
of these
SDGs.
SDGs comes from.
Okay, okay. Towards the middle, you started mentioning the five P's. Would you like to elaborate on that? You know, the five P's and their importance, the importance they hold in the concept of SDGs as well?
Yes, yes. That's. I mean to say like this is the actual scripture of this
Okay.
entire amazing SDGs. Like, earlier, what was the problem? The problem, like, there was a massive environmental threats. There was the issue
Yeah.
of the global warming. There was the issue
Mm-hmm.
of the loss of biodiversity. And even though there was an issue between the inequalities, rich and the poor member states of the United Nations, and then they sit together and then they form up these amazing 17 goals. And if we see about the concept of 5 P's, which we call like the SDGs holistic approach, the universal and integrated agenda, let's say. So those 5 P's, starting from people, planet, prosperity, peace and justice,
Planet.
and partnership. Now, if we talk about
Yep.
itself, the you can say the five P's itself. Like, what about these five P's? Like, I mean, how would say like people were the part? So it's just about like to end the poverty and hunger in all forms
Mm-hmm.
of the issues. Then we talk about the planet, because first, of course, the people, the mankind, how to serve, how they can sustain their sustainable living and everything onto that. Then we talk about the planet, protecting of planet, taking care of all the national resources, life on the earth, like on the land, life under the sea, of course. This is very important to protect about. Then the prosperity, the economical growth, and then ensuring the fulfillment of the needs and requirements, and of course
Mm-hmm.
by respecting the planet, no doubt that is very very important. And then
Yes.
we have the peace and justice in today's world. Like, it is very very necessary. We need a peace, prosperity, and of course we need a peace and security, and we need a collaboration. Like, the member states need to have a proper collaboration with each other.
Yep.
I mean we had huge problem. Like, check out this global pandemic.
Yep.
It was a big mess for the entire human kind today. So we need a peace and security. We need a peace and justice, actually, not between the countries. Even though, even with the institutions, every countries have a different institutions, their socials, their culture, their environmental, their justice system. That needs to be in a proper way, proper justice, judiciary system, proper justice. That needs to be. So this is the entire concept of five P's:
Okay.
planet, people, prosperity, peace
Prosperity.
and justice, and partnership. And the beauty of this goal, actually, it has bifurcated. All those 17 goals are actually divided into five P's. So from first to seven, we talk about the people. It means
Okay.
these are the goals who have a directly inclined from the human being, from the mankind. Like, goal
Mm-hmm.
number one, no poverty. Goal number two, zero hunger. Three is good health and well-being. Fourth is the quality education. Fifth is actually gender equality. Six is clean water and sanitization. And number seven is affordable and clean energy. So these are the seven people goals. We call them as a people goal because it does have the direct incline. They have the direct, you can say, link with the human, actually. Then we talk about the prosperity, the
Mm-hmm.
progression, that we talk about, like, how we can move our country, how we can move our life. So from 8 to 12, it's known as the prosperity goals.
Okay.
That is number 8, good jobs and economic condition, of course, economic growth, when we talk about the our country growths and everything. Number 9, and a very very important these days, it's a industry innovation and infrastructure. We call about the industrial revolution, IR 4.0, which start from
Mm-hmm.
1.0, then 2, 3, and we are in an era of 4.0, which
Okay.
where we see. And recently you've seen that web 4.0 have introduced meta, these things. So
Yeah.
these are the technological things. 9. Number 10, reduce inequalities, of course. Number 11, we have sustainable communities, community development, of course, different CSR activities onto that. Number
Yep.
12 is responsible of consumption and production. So these are the 5 prosperity goals from 8 to 12. Then we have from 13 to 15 are the 3 most important planning goals, like the planet action, global warming issues, and all those things. Number 14 is life below the water. Number 15 is life on land. And
Online.
then 16 itself is the peace, foster peaceful, like just like inclusive societies, as I said, like to empowering your institutions, civil institutions, judiciary systems, and all those things. That is very very important. And then in a broad way, your foreign relations, your diplomatic relations among the countries, and everything onto that. And then number 17, It's actually, I'm gonna say it's the nutshell.
Okay.
17 is my most favorite goal, is in
Okay.
nutshell. That is the partnership for the goals. Like
Okay.
you are actually partnering with each other in order to achieve all those great goals. I mean,
Okay.
I would say like if you put 16 aside and
Mm-hmm.
17, 16 will
Mm-hmm.
not be completed until unless the 17 will take a power onto that, because 17 is the very important for the partnership. One of the
Okay.
biggest example we had it uh, is the global pandemic. Like during this global pandemic, the world actually became close to each other,
Came
and no
together.
doubt
Yeah.
they actually promote the goal number 17. They were partnering with each other, they are helping with each other, they are aiding to that, they are assisting to each other. They are more into the cooperation side, they are more into to helping each other. Of course there was an emotional factor does into that, but let's put it into the SDG side. So the 17 was very profound onto that, and and 17 was really really you can say highlighted during that time. And in currently right now you can see how the countries are helping with each other, how they are collaborating with each other. So it was a great partnership. I mean, you cannot, I mean, today's era, in my opinion, you cannot progress, you cannot meet your targets until unless you have a good partnership. So the
Absolutely.
17 is actually the entire orbit, in my opinion, for this great 16, and then attaching 17 on top to the entire
Goals.
span of this great goals. Hope that answers your question.
Okay. Okay. That's That's a wonderful explanation, sir. But my question now here is, how do we interlink education with these sustainable development goals, considering that each of these goals have a huge and, starkly different theme. One is, say, life on land, another is well-being, another is labor, then education. Then how do we, bring education into the picture, considering these 17 goals you just mentioned?
Neha, I mean, we are actually at the moment in an era where education is really necessary. Although, of course, there is a Universal Declaration of Human Rights which does talk about the education, but currently it is a demand. It needs to
Yeah.
be a really really mandatory, it needs to be a universal, and that is why itself in 17 goals we have goal number 4, which is more focused into the quality education.
Yes, on education.
Even in back 1987 20th March, it has the Brundtland Commission has actually said that education towards sustainable development goals meets the needs of the future present generation without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. So it is the education that actually helps and that aims to preserve environmental integrity, economical viability, and if you talk about the society for present and even the future generation.
Mm-hmm.
Education for sustainable development is actually addresses all great objectives, where we're talking about the establishment of broad teaching and learning processes, and we talk about the emphasizing in interdisciplinary and holistic approaches, and which promote the critical and creative thinking in education. Even though in May 2015, a UNESCO conference on world education, which was actually held in Korea, that they
Okay.
declared that new education goals for the year of
Hmm.
2030. And they stated like,
Okay.
our vision is to transform life through the education. So that's the
Hmm.
important, that's
Okay.
really important, like how education is have the great important, that actually recognizing the important role of education, I must say, in our life, of course. So
Okay.
I mean education has itself a great incline. I mean, and even check again, I have to keep repeating because the world has actually witnessed, we are still suffering with this global pandemic. May God
Yep.
bless us, may God bless actually the entire world. But the case is that now the education is needed for us.
Yep.
It is actually, it does have the different you can say kind of we do have the different type of educations now and different techniques now. And as I said, like goal number 4 itself, it's purely focusing about
Talk.
ensure inclusive and equitable quality education. And of course, it does also promote the lifelong learning opportunities. So if we
Yeah.
see the targets of goal number 4, which is emphasizing about the education, that is the free and a primary education, about the learning concept. It is also says about the equal access to quality pre-primary education, like the early childhood education. It is also talk about the participation in different activities. It is also talk about the equal access to the affordable technical and vocational and higher education as well. Even
Okay.
it is also talk about the increase in the number of people with relevant skills for the financial success, like which particular, it is about the filtering them, which particular person is good as compared to their skills. Like if you just filtering them, so which person have this much skills will take it for that time, that person is that skill will take this work. And then main thing, equality. The
Okay.
policy, I mean the goal itself, the target 4.5 itself talk about the policy on the you can say equality, like eliminating all forms of discrimination in education. And then we talk about the literacy and numeracy, itself a skill, of course. Then we talk about the education for sustainable development itself and the global citizenship concept.
Yep.
And then building and the inclusion and upgrading of a safe school, a good school environment, a great environment by using different resources. And then expanding the concept of scholarships. That is very, very important. Trust me, this goal number 4, if you just see all those targets, it actually really, really needed. And then very much important is about the teachers' development, a well-trained teachers, the supply, or you can say the great equipped of a qualified teachers, and then teachers exchanges program, like from the developed countries to developing countries to underdeveloping or least developed countries, from the developed countries. It is the exchanging of the great teachers as well. And now if you compare with our current life, these all, you can say, the things that I've repeating that has mentioned into the goal number 4 target and its targets and then indicators as well. If we just compare, these are the necessities, these are the very, very important thing as well. Check
Yep.
out our current youth. If we talk about their importance, if we talk about their inclusion, I did mention earlier that these goals have the very, very much inclusion of the youth of
Yep.
today's. it is
Yes.
it is very important. So the concept of education is very, very important into in our current life actually. And it is also very much important as compare, you can say, with the concept of education as well. Not even for the 4, I must say, we have 5 other goals which do have the direct references of education. I mean, goal number 3,
Yep.
health and well-being, and its
Yes.
target 3.7, it have the direct reference of education. Goal number
Okay.
5, that is the gender equality. Of course, we talk about the eliminating all forms of discrimination, of course. So goal number 5, target 5.6. And then goal number 8, target 8.6, decent work and sustainable growth. And then responsible consumption and production, 12. And the last one is 13, climate change mitigation, actually, goal number 13
Okay.
and 13.3. So with the education, or let's make it more easy, one of the biggest issue which I did highlight earlier today is the lack of awareness among our people. So with
Yes.
this
Yes.
education, using education as the major catalyst
Okay.
to actually achieving and providing the great knowledge to the people today about the
Okay.
SDGs. So these are very, very necessary, I must say, today's world. And that's the great concept of SDGs through the eye and with the link of education, I must say.
Thank you so much. So thank you for highlighting, the part where you mentioned the role of other SD, the role of education in other
Yes.
SDGs. That was a point I was about to ask you, because there's a misconception that only SDG 4 is restricted to education,
No,
but
not at all.
absolutely.
It,
So
it
there's
does
a
have one. Yes.
Oh, would you like to expand on this as well, for our audience, that there's a huge role of education in other SDGs as well? Not just particularly name them, because I think you've named them as well, but, in general, the role of education, which is not just restricted to SDG Goal 4, but is, relevant throughout all 17 SDGs.
Yes, certainly. As I did even further bifurcated by 3, 5, 8,
Mhm.
12, and 13.
Yep.
These were, you can say, have much inclined to
Hmm.
itself. We talk about those planet, prosperity, people,
Yep.
peace and
But,
justice, of course, and then yes, and yes, their progression, of course. So
mhm.
without education, you cannot understand them. Now, uh, check out the latest technology for the health and well-being. Of course,
Okay.
there is an education, there is a proper scientific research behind onto that side.
Yep.
Indeed,
Yes.
it's an
Yeah.
education that helps you to do that. And then we talk about the gender equality. Different
Hmm.
policies has been introduced, different you can say frameworks and law have been introduced. Different parliament are actually introducing the bills of to that side. So
Yep.
it is actually the research service, it is actually the needs and requirement, and different service has been made it based on the education perspective. And then we talk about the decent work and sustainable development sustainable growth, actually SDG 8. So I mean, education is everywhere. It is
Yep.
just because of the education that you are actually somehow finding out the solution of all those problems that we are currently facing, and earlier which what we faced during, I mean, in the previous different pandemic. And of course, any problems or different problems that have been through, all we are forcing. And in fact, with that, we are also forecasting for upcoming issues and all those things.
Yep.
So
Okay.
education is indeed a very, very important, and universal education concept is very clear that it's needs. It is not the need, but in my opinion, it is now mandatory in order to progress. We talk about, or we actually say about the youth concept. Today's youth like is very, very important to that, and the way that they are increasing and the way they are actually somehow taking the notions of their empowerment and then development. But trust me, a quality education will somehow enhance them more. They do
Yep.
take the notion, of that they need to be empowered, that their skills need to be developed. But without education, it's not possible at all. It is really,
Absolutely.
really important for them to have the skills, to have those skills that the current market, that the current corporate world actually needed. We talk about like specifying that particular skill for that desired work, actually. So this
Okay.
concept of education is actually bifurcating them and giving the proper skill which the current world, which the current corporate world and the industry do require them today. So education is the most important and the mandatory, I must say that, to progress, to move on, and then to, of course, carry forward the stance and the notion for the empowerment as well.
That's a very good thought, sir. But my question now will be, sir, that for the past 2 years, everything is, in shambles. Education is at crossroads. There have been so many dropouts. This, gender parity and gender inclusive return to schools. The past 2 years have actually kind of, set us back a few steps when it comes to education. And since you highlighted the importance of education in SDGs, um, I have a feeling that the pandemic has, as I said, set us back a few steps. So how do we go about with after this? How do we go ahead, considering the considering the setbacks that the pandemic has given us, in terms of education, education in emergencies. There have been so many political instances that have been happening around the world that have, school dropouts have increased. Girls are not being admitted to school that much, as I have read. And in general, teachers are also burned out. Children are burned out, after 2 years of constant Zoom and online classes. So how do we go about with this, and keeping in mind the importance of education in achieving these SDGs?
Neha, the thing is that not only SDGs, but I must say, like every aspect and every important thing which was actually very close to be achieved has been brutally exposed,
Yes,
unfortunately.
yes,
Even the
yes.
great developed countries, their infrastructures and their medical systems, their economical has unfortunately brutally exposed for that. It's just because of this global pandemic. Indeed, it is no doubt that the progress which we actually have aimed from 2015 to 2030, as per the research and all those resolutions has been happened, we were actually focusing like we are nearby. Only 5 years has left, of
Hmm.
course.
Hmm.
I'm talking about like in 2000, sorry, 2000, 2020 actually, when we have actually at the peak of the global pandemic. So the progress has disturbed, of course,
Yes.
but
Progress has been
trust
stopped.
me, trust me. In my opinion, SDGs is the best solution for all the governments, for all the institutions, to
Okay.
move back, to get up what has been had we had.
Okay.
The thing is that people still think there's a concept that's come that after this global pandemic there is not much SDGs progress can be seen.
Okay.
The entire framework of SDGs are actually dismantled, but I don't think so. In my opinion, that is necessary. If
Okay.
you see all those 17 goals and their targets, and then measuring them with their indicators, if all those governments, all those nations start investing and start taking roadmap, or by taking those targets and the goals of that, trust me, they will be try to retaliate back what happened with the effect and actually the distortions and actually the aftermath of this global pandemic, because we have just bifurcated
Oh,
the life necessity are actually comes into all those 17s. I mean, it covers everything what we needed. We talk about the people's inclusion, we talk about the planet, we talk about the growth of that. So if the governments, if the nations are adopting, if the institutions are actually adopting and investing and focusing on these amazing 17 goals, definitely they will be able to progress, definitely they will be able to somehow get their steps back into the progress which was actually been unfortunately have the setback of this global pandemic. So yes, it actually made a big problem. It actually somehow slow and somehow pause the progress of the SDGs. But nevertheless, we should have to progress on these SDGs because, as I said, like in my opinion, this is very very vital goals. These goals
absolutely.
have the best solutions for the humankind. A great solution. Yes, it needs to be more added. Perhaps, like I mean. Some things need to be more, which is need to be introduced actually, which is very important and can be triggered when any kind of pandemic does comes into that. That is very important to that. But by just saying that these the important of the goals has no more left, it is I must say it is not be justifiable for all those great efforts has been made onto that. And we talk about as you ask about the education concept, like check it out. I know it is difficult to accept and to adapt the concept of the online education and
Yeah.
through the Zoom and all those things. But on the other hand, do we have any other option, by the way? Do you think
I
that
don't think so.
we We actually let our children to stay at home and doing nothing and just to mess up with that. I know that we actually have a loss of 2.5 years so far. Okay, and
Yep.
still some spikes are coming, but thank god we are somehow uh, cooperating, we are somehow actually negotiating with that. But just to staying at home, but just to not progressing, it's not the answers actually. It's not actually a good solution for that, because it means that you will not progress. It means you will turn into the gray. Rather that we actually innovators, we actually come up with some great concept of a new quality education. We actually introduce some great technologies that was not earlier before, just 2 years back. I mean, trust me, I was not aware about like Zoom was actually something that we meet people and do something onto that. Now see how it is to it. And then check about this StreamYard. There was no proper concept onto that. There was no proper concept of using a proper technology, or you can say the proper digitalization. So
Absolutely.
every field and everything do have the positive. We just take the positive side of that. So we need to progress further. We need to retaliate back. We need to come up with the better solutions. And of course, we need to look after all those great SDGs goals in order to come up and copy up with the current situation what we have. So I'm sure with your platform, with your organization, and with what my you can say a limited knowledge and limited exposure experiences so far, I'm sure that we all understand, and people who are viewing today will understand the concept, the importance of SDGs. I mean, it's very important. It have everything what we needed, and it needs to be upgraded more. Of course, it does require time by time into that side. But those amazing time, what 300 goals, 3 years of meetings since 1972, they made a
Absolutely.
great job for all of us, and that's why they have clearly mentioned about the future generation. They really made something great for the future generation. Now it is our responsibility how we can further enhance for our future generation, for our of course children who will be taking the whole, who will be acting and taking the responsibility for the nation building. That is very very important for us to understand.
Absolutely. I really agree with your point when you say that the SDGs have not lost their importance, because there's a concept going around here that is the inclusion of SDGs into classrooms and curriculums. So, as your role as a UN ambassador, would you like to give a word of advice to our teachers, or maybe, teachers and the educational fraternity in general, as to how we can, hands on include SDGs into our classrooms and in our curriculums?
Neha, I would personally advise them, ask them to specifically have a look to the goal number 4, the quality
Okay.
education. The
Okay.
targets of those goals and their reports. Like every year, we have the report on the progression. We'll
Hmm.
see the different ideas onto that.
Okay.
We see different progress, like which country has actually progressed onto that side. So if we
Okay.
see all those great targets, it does of course give you the great concept of a good quality education, especially for the teachers as well, because it does says about the teachers concept, it does says about the enhancement, it
Yeah.
does says about the different exchanging program for the teachers. Because if you empower, if you build and develop the teachers simultaneously, or you can say right after that, your students will be of course empowered. They will be of course in a proper manner, they will be able to find out their skills because their teachers are well equipped. So the concept itself comes into that. And you know let me tell you one thing. When I was start reading about all those grades, I mean, it was a time when I was in lockdown actually, and that was a
Okay.
time that gave me enough time to read about these SDGs. And I said, wow. And then you will find what or all those things that you are actually doing in your daily life.
Data.
Now
Yep.
I will ask those esteemed teachers just to read all those goals. They will find, okay, they were doing actually. So directly and indirectly, they are promoting, they have adopted the concept of SDGs because they are doing into that. because they were not aware about that. There was a lack of awareness onto that. They were not appropriate knowledge enough to understand that. Therefore they said like, what is the SDGs and how SDGs are actually play a vital role in that. You are actually promoting the SDGs because the beauty of these amazing 17 goals, they have been made. what
Hmm.
what we have witnessed on what we are
Yep.
doing. So they are actually from our life. We just need to continue them. We just need to time by time enhance them. So the teachers needs to have a look onto that, and I'm sure they are actually promoting onto that, and I'm sure they are actually progressing their life according to that actually, and then somehow they can enhance that based on their current needs. Like this needs to be done now. The
Yep.
concept has somehow obsolete maybe, and the current
Mm-hmm.
needs and the current requirement needs to be into that. That needs to
Mm-hmm.
be more enhanced to that, so they can progress a lot. They can help into that somehow. So that's the beauty of great SDGs, I must say.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking that question for our teachers who will obviously realize that they have been knowingly, unknowingly implementing the SDGs, but they were not aware of this at their end. That's a good thought. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir, this morning. Before we conclude, would you like to, draw some conclusion or give some parting thoughts to our teachers, parents, educational leadership, and all our viewers in general?
Yeah, in conclusion, I must say, of course, yes, we have been hit by this global pandemic, what is going on right
Absolutely.
now. But please, let's not stop. Let's not say, like, I mean, the world has ended. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, this was the biggest and the greatest pandemic in the history of humankind. So that actually exposed so many areas. But let's not sit. Let's not just to keep watch and what is going on there.
Yep.
Let's keep progressing. Let's keep move on to that. And with regards to the SDGs, I would say, uh, I know it's not an easy task. It is
Yep.
very, very challenging. In fact, after this global pandemic, it has become more challenging now because of the lack of resources, lack of the fund, and lack of the different monitoring activities and funding. And of course, the countries are actually facing aid issues. The developed countries is still actually are in a big problem after this global pandemic. But somehow we need to progress onto that. We need to take these goals in our life to progress ourselves, even from the teacher side, from the parent side, from the family side, from the corporate world, from the industrial side, from the judiciary side, from
Mm-hmm.
the government side, and from
Absolutely.
the country relations side, foreign affairs side, foreign diplomacy side. We have to invest, we have to give the time to these SDGs. And I'm
Absolutely.
sure if we adopt, if we able to find out the best out of it, we will definitely be able to start progressing our life back in order somehow, and in fact enhancing ourselves as per the needs and requirement. So it's in a challenging and it's in a difficult, but at the end of the day we have to adopt the culture now. We have to adapt that. We have to move in this manner and to find out the positive impact. The main
Absolutely.
thing is the positive impact. The conspiracies is going on, the negative thoughts is going on here and there, and it's another thing. But find out the positivity that could somehow progress their life. I mean,
Absolutely.
even do you think is it enough what we had earlier from last 2.5 year? Do you think is it enough for us, or you still expecting more onto that? So let's flush, let's filter everything, move on, take the positivity, take learning what we had, what we have been through with that, and keep move on into that. Seriously, that's my suggestion, especially to our parents, especially to our
Yep.
family. That is very, very important to that. Please, please, let's focusing on to that. Let's not just to stick one thing onto that. Okay.
That's a wonderful part and a very wonderful conclusion of the importance of SDGs and the fact that they are challenging, but then only when we embrace them, there is light at the end of the tunnel. That is a very wonderful summation. Thank you so much for joining us today, this morning. And thank you for your thoughts, for enlightening us, our educators, teachers, parents, about SDGs. And thank you for taking us through the journey of the entire journey of the formation of SDGs and then their implementation and what lies ahead of us in the face of this pandemic. Thank you so
Certainly,
much,
I'm
Shah.
honored. Thank you very much, Neha. Thank you very much for your organization. And of course, you guys are doing a great job. Certainly, it is also part of SDG as well that you're promoting
Yes.
them. And you are
Yes, sir.
actually unfolding all those areas that is really necessary to that. Thank you very much for
Yes.
your organization. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for joining us today, sir. Have a good day and hope to see you around again.
Likewise. Thank you. Have a good day.